Question: what do Hunter x Hunter, Berserk, Nana all have in common? I'm sure some, if not most of you watching this video, were able to answer my question, but they're all manga that, for one reason or another, have previously been or are currently on an indefinite hiatus. And it's not an easy thing for fans of these works. We obviously want to read more into these stories that have captivated us, but not at the cost of the creator who brought the work to life in the first place, like what sadly happened to Berserk's Kentaro Miura in 2021. While I personally don't resonate with the 4 manga I've mentioned as much as many of you probably do, I still understand and sympathize with the conflicting feeling of a manga going away for an unknown amount of time. There's another manga out there that has been on hiatus for years with no clear sign of returning, and I want to talk about it today. So sit back, let me tell you about a manga I hold near and dear to my heart, Iris Zero. Iris Zero is set in a world where kids are born with a superpower, aptly called an iris, that allows them to see various things they're not normally supposed to. This can range from seeing who someone may have feelings for as an arrow above their head, pointing to the person in question, to seeing literal labels stuck to people associated with how society sees them. The story stars Toru Mizushima, a high school boy who, unlike everyone else in his class, does not possess an iris, and is therefore labeled as an Iris Zero. Because of this, as well as the blatant discrimination pointed toward him, Toru developed a policy of minimal exposure, trying to stay in the background as much as possible and avoid attention. One day, Toru is approached and asked out by Koyuki Sasamori, a popular girl in Toru's class who has an iris that allows her to see who is qualified to accomplish a certain task, represented with an X or an O above their head. As it later turns out, Sasamori was asking Toru for help. You see, because of Sasamori's iris, the student council relies on her to find qualified candidates, and in this case, she was tasked with finding a qualified student council president. Only this time, no matter how much she tried, no one in the school appeared to be qualified. As a result, Sasamori changed her thinking and began looking for someone qualified to help her find a president when she finds Toru. Toru, because he is an Iris Zero, isn't distracted by the filter everyone with irises has and sees things the way they are. As such, he's able to understand other people's feelings or situations much more vividly than everyone else, and is able to help Sasamori find the qualified presidential candidate with relative ease, by walking into the student council room with a flower on his head, as a way to tell her that she's been so preoccupied with looking at everyone else, she didn't ever try to look at herself. As you've probably realized by now, fans of Hyoka may be especially interested in this manga, with it having a similar story structure. Every subsequent arc features Sasamori, or someone related to her, approaching Toru with a mystery involving certain people and their irises, with the hope that he can help them solve the issue. This setup establishes a great window for well-written drama and fun, colorful characters to keep you interested and invested for quite a while. As the story progresses, we're introduced to a few more characters that make up the ensemble and learn more about how their irises affect their personal hangups. Like, for example, one of my favorite characters, Hijiri Shinozuka, whose iris allows him to see approaching death in the form of black butterflies. I'm not going to spoil the story too much, and I encourage you to read the whole story for yourself, but his past of learning the meaning of life when he can see death and how Toru helps him deal with his iris was such a touching moment early on and really helped cement their friendship that paid off in a big way later on in the manga. Being an Iris Zero isn't easy either. We hear about it vaguely through Toru's minimal exposure policy, but it's further explored later on as Sasamori looks into his life with Shinozuka in an attempt to better understand him, as well as seeing how the entire class can easily be turned against him with a simple rumor in what is probably the meatiest and most interesting arc to date. Once you get to the Iris Killer arc, the story starts to come together with all the pieces playing an important role in helping solve the issue at hand. If you've given it a try, but the episodic nature of the early chapters weren't enough to hook you, I'd say give this arc a try and see how you feel. That said though, this series isn't without its flaws. The series does have romance in it, and while I do appreciate the chemistry between the characters in question, it's brought on really early on, giving the characters barely any time to even become friends, let alone a couple. That said, I may be able to understand where the rushed development came from. According to one of the afterwards, Iris Zero was initially intended to be a mini-series in Comic Alive, but later became a full series due to its popularity. I wasn't reading it that early in its publication, but maybe the romance was quickly developed to meet the low chapter count of the miniseries, but was later forced to stretch itself out when it got extended. I can also see the idea that Toru being the only one to see things as they are as a little far-fetched, but I can see it a little differently. I took the main message of the story to be something along the lines of, once you stop looking at the world through a certain lens, you'll be able to understand more perspectives. Now, yes, it's a little on the nose, but it works for what it is in my opinion, and it didn't detract from the overall experience or make it feel like Toru is a super genius while everyone else is dumb. Everyone in the ensemble has a role to play and something to contribute, especially in that later arc. The other issue I want to point out is not something that anyone can really control, but it's where the manga left off. Right before going back on hiatus back in 2018, chapter 44 ended on a big cliffhanger in the middle of what may be its final arc. Again, that's nobody's fault, but it may be a big deterrent for someone wanting to get into the manga, wanting to see how things turn out. It's really hard seeing a manga you love go on hiatus. I loved Iris Zero when I first read it, but over time, the series kept drifting further and further away as I continued to get older, and more series popped up for me. While I, and probably many of you, want to see the person working on the series get better first and foremost, there's still that dark, selfish part of me that wants to see more, read more, find out how it all comes to a close. I wish, even as I was typing out this script, that I could give you an answer, some way to deal with those conflicting feelings, but I know it can be tough. Some part of me wants to say, treat it like the series is complete, like the final chapter before hiatus was the final chapter of the series, and any future chapter is just a cherry on top of something you already love. But that doesn't solve the feeling of wanting to see the true ending. Thankfully, some of the series I mentioned at the top have made their returns in some form, and I'm very happy for those fans who get to see more of their beloved story. But for the rest of us, I hope you can remain hopeful that one day, that manga we love will find its way back. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know I left it on a bit of a bittersweet note, but until next time, my name's Jay. I like anime. Happy reading.